Whether it's during an epic battle at the bottom of a dungeon against a dragon, or there's a trap where the water rises over the heads of the adventurers, eventually something is going to go wrong for a player at your table, and a character dies. The player that just lost that character is going to have a reaction, and sometimes it's intense. I'm James, and I'm going to try to put into words all the things that I've learned over the years about dealing what can be the hardest, most uncomfortable part of being a dungeon master. Dealing with the player's reaction to their character dying. Most players don't have a problem. There's a moment of disappointment, sure, and maybe some anger that they're the ones that the dragon bit in half and not the wizard that's been lobbing fireballs at them for 5 sessions. But the party starts working on a resurrection plan, or the player immediately makes a new character or has one ready and hands it to you, saying, all right, whenever you're ready for me to re-enter, here you go. But some players have a more intense reaction, and often that the DM is the target of that reaction. Maybe you explain when the campaign started, I run a grim dark game of swords and sorcery, and there is limited to no healing magic. Resurrection doesn't happen. All the players nodded along and were super enthusiastic. Yeah, world building's great. And even this player, until their character died. They might be confused and look at the book and go, no, seriously, that's how death saves work. Surely I should have started making death saves the round after I died. I don't automatically fail one because the dragon took multi-attack, right? They might just go straight to yelling. This is stupid. You're a bad dungeon master. I've seen this other dungeon masters online, and they would have made different calls. You should learn how to be a dungeon master before you do that. Perhaps it's, okay, I get what you're saying, but I didn't understand this. Could we just go back a few rounds? I wouldn't have done X if I understood Y. No, we didn't buy the diamonds in town to resurrect, but we have 1,000 gold. Can't we just say that we bought the diamonds? What about the cleric and divine intervention? Can they just do that? Maybe it's worse. Maybe they just go silent. I've had a player get up after the character dies and leave the house, and everyone went, uh-oh. And someone had to go after them and check to make sure that they were okay. If those things are sounding familiar, denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, it's because they are 4 of the 5 stages of grief. It may sound odd to you that someone would care this much about an RPG game. It is, after all, a collection of stats on paper and funny dice. But keep in mind, some people will watch a television show or read a book, and if their favorite character dies, they stop watching that show or reading that book. Every time a character died in Song of Ice and Fire, I put that series down for months. I liked that character. I'm done with this. Is it so hard to imagine then that if you made this character, if you wrote their backstory, that you are that much more invested in it? You were there when they cast their first fireball. You were the one that convinced an army to go against the wills of the king and go against the undead hordes of Orcus. And now your character is dead. Permanently. This sucks. Perhaps for that reason, some dungeon masters and some players believe that death should never be a part of their game. It's not on the table as a possible consequence. But for other players and some dungeon masters, myself among them, if that ultimate stake, dying, is not possible, was this journey really worth it? How much of a hero are you really if you could have fumbled your way into slaying Tiamat eventually? But it sure does suck when a player is yelling at us or they're disappointed. For story purposes as well, death adds narrative weight. This is an epic moment in these characters' lives. Our cultural stories are filled with deaths of loved ones, spurring characters to action, taking up noble causes or paths of vengeance. One of my favorite anime series, Full Metal Alchemist, their lives are marked by deaths. The Elric brothers have their mother die off screen, and that sends them on their quest. You might also find from a tactical sense as well that your players, once someone has really died, that they start being more strategic, more cautious. They gather information, they scout out, they use clairvoyance and things to find out what's around the corner before they go charging in. Because all of a sudden, death is very real for these characters that they like. But it sure does suck when the player's yelling at us and when they're disappointed, and we'd really like our friends to have a good time playing this game. How do we help them get through this? If you go online and ask, hey, here's what happened in my Dungeons & Dragons game last week, and my players are very angry at me about it. Am I a bad dungeon master? People will chime in. I'm happy to give my 2 cents. Keep in mind, we don't know your players. We don't know how they viewed the situation and exactly what you described. You may think that you broadcast X to them, but what they got may not have even been close. I'm an artist by training, if not by trade. And one of the things that comes up is that when you show someone your work, they don't see exactly what you meant when you painted it. They bring their themness to the painting. And the same goes for Dungeons & Dragons. Whatever you said was processed by their brain, which tried to make a picture, and their imagination and yours may be way off. You're not 100% responsible for that misinterpretation. That's part of the game. The players take an imperfect explanation, form an understanding, and then go forward with a plan. But you are responsible for being fair and impartial and for cleaning up ambiguities. You should re-examine the encounter. Was the encounter legitimately unfair? Did you put them up against a demon that they couldn't possibly overcome resistance or something? I don't really do balanced encounters, but I do believe in fair encounters. Players should tip the odds so that something that is not balanced is now balanced or balanced in their favor. But you can't really tip the odds for a level 2 group of adventurers to killing an ancient red dragon. That is unfair. And if you did that, that is up to you to fix that. Did you get a ruling wrong? Was there an edge case or character ability that would have changed things? Or was there an interpretation that was equally valid 2 different ways? Okay, I can see how you got to your interpretation of this rule. In the future, we're going to interpret it this way. But because I can see how you got there, we're going to say that your character made their last death save and is stable and unconscious. I wouldn't normally relitigate an encounter with a player and go through like the play-by-play. If they ask, I would say, I'm not that kind of player right now. I can't look back at this with anything other than 2020 vision. And I made the encounter, so I kind of had ideas about ways in which I thought it would be possible, but I'm not supposed to come up with those solutions. That's up to the party to decide if they've got a good idea. I think there are different things you could have done, but that's up to you and the party to decide, and maybe this was the best way, and just the dice didn't roll in your favor. Usually that spurs them to talk with the party, or the party to go, well, we should have done X, or realize, well, we did just kind of kick in the door and we didn't think about things. The exception to relitigating is if a player really didn't understand a ruling and was like, I thought this worked this way. And then I'd go through and go, no, it doesn't work that way. Read me the ability. And then I'd go through that with them because they're trying to understand those rules. The other exception would be if it's a dungeon master and they're trying to understand how I built the encounter and go, why did you do it that way? But that has a lot to do with like reading into their tone of voice and trying to figure out, how much time has passed. Is this enough time that this person honestly wants to understand how something was put together for their own dungeon mastering? Or are they looking for something else? Often when players are going, well, what should we have done? What they're looking for is a way out or a way to pin this on you and to say, this is your fault. We couldn't possibly have thought of that. You're just asking us to be psychic. And you're getting into some very dangerous territory. If you start down that road, it's not going to really help them out of anger. So what do you do about anger? This is probably one of the worst parts about being a dungeon master. If they're yelling at you, causing you to question what you did, if they're trying to bully you into relenting and giving them what they want, it sucks. It would be really nice if folks would stop doing that, if they'd stop verbally assaulting someone who's just trying to learn their part of the game and provide an engaging, story-driven adventure for their friends. But that's not how people work. Anger is part of the process, and we're the target of the anger because unlike, say, a doctor who failed to save a patient, we can just make the pain go away. We can hand wave and say, your character is alive, but that causes other problems. You can't really easily walk that back. Every situation is now going to need that solution. Death is off the table. There's not really any stakes anymore. Fortunately, sticking to your guns means that players are going to be angry at you. You can say, I'm sorry. Yes, this sucks. But you can't do much more than that. At this moment, you, the rules, and the game are all bundled together in causing their pain. And if you give too much, you can sound like you're trying to justify to the players, and they may want to push. And if you don't give in, it can get much worse. Going the other way around, you can sound patronizing or callous, or that you're making it their fault that their character died. And even if the rest of the table would agree that, yes, it was that player's fault, they did something they shouldn't, you're going to make them feel stupid and hurt, and that's just going to make it worse as well. But if you're consistent and even with your adjudication, if players show that players can see that you're willing to take consideration and go through like, okay, hang on, let me think about this. Oh, let me hear how you heard that ruling. And you explain like, I see how you got there. Here's why I thought this way. If you show that even-handedness, this will happen less and less to you. The players will start to trust that you are a even-handed, fair dungeon master and not a kind of adversarial dungeon master. If the player's bargaining and they come up with a legitimate way within the game rules and the world that we're crafting, sure, of course I'd let them do it. Yes, you can travel to Limbo, collect the soul of this person, stick it into a empty phylactery that a lich was trying to make, and shove that phylactery into the head of a golem body, and yes, your friend can come back to life. That works within the rules of magic, kind of plausible. But if they're just grasping at straws, looking for some sort of undo button, constantly trying divine intervention, I'm sorry, no, that's not how the game works. We have a set of rules that we play by, and per those rules, your character has died. There's not much you can do about that. If they're depressed, you can apologize that they're not having fun. You can feel bad that a player, a friend, is not having a good time at the table right now. Try to listen to them. They may just need someone to hear how bad they feel about this. That person may not be you. Maybe they have a friend, a partner, or spouse at the table, and it might be a good time to take a break so they can go process, talk to who they need to, and hopefully come back to the table and we can move on with the story and help this player make a new character or come up with a way to resurrect that would work. Well, this has been a downer episode, but I see and hear this conversation a lot online and then from friends that are new dungeon masters. And it's really tempting as dungeon masters to throw it back at the players because we're getting yelled at, and that's making us feel uncomfortable. They should stop being mean and nasty about it. They should be more mature. It's just a game. And they are being mean and nasty about it. And maybe they should be more mature. And it is a game. But it's a game that they care about enough to have a deep emotional reaction to it. And they kind of can't help it. It's just part of their grief process. But it does suck that we're in the middle of it. But the advice of just talk to your players and say what? I didn't know what to say the first time. This is what I've gathered after decades of playing. And I'm not even sure it would work with every player. Everyone is an individual. So you're going to kind of have to come up with your answer yourself. But hopefully some of these ideas will ring true when you're in the moment. Go, wait, I get why they're going through this. And maybe try to some empathy and try to understand what they're going through and help them get back to loving the game as well. Eventually, this all ends up as part of the party story. If you've encounter this and you have some advice about how you've handled it well in your party, or maybe how you handled it and it didn't go well, so that players can go, okay, I don't want to do that, or dungeon masters say, I don't want to do that, put it down in the description. Everyone's different. The more resources we have for, look, I did X and it ended up badly, I did Y and it ended up good, the better for whatever future dungeon master comes across this. Until next time, dungeon masters, remember, you're a player too. Try to have some fun.